Wow.
Yeah?
That's an animal.
That's an animal, right? Yeah.
The steps at the beginning make it sound like someone in a rush to get somewhere, and then when they eventually get there, they're
I think
violating
the
it.
steps are not somebody I assume that's the person recording and not the animal.
Just like bowling up to the frog at full speed here. Is it a frog? Is it a toad? What's going on here? A toad.
It's not a toad. It's not.
Is it an amphibian?
It's not an amphibian. No.
Okay, I was going to say that's pretty crazy.
I know we do frog calls, but like I wanted to mix it up.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. What is that?
I mean, describe the sort of visual. If you were to put an animal to this sound, where you would go, knowing that it's not an amphibian.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Could it be a crocodilian?
It could be a crocodilian.
Okay. Well, I'm going to guess then. It sounds like one of the smaller ones. It's a bit of cheeky. Okay, I'm going to stop the sound now.
I think you should keep it playing the whole episode, personally.
The whole episode.
Just a lovely background ambience.
So it's crocodilian. I'm going to say freshwater crocodile.
It's not a freshwater crocodile. It's a Chinese alligator.
Oh, very good.
Which I also learned
and what
is occasionally referred to as a muddy dragon.
Muddy dragon?
Yeah.
I can imagine that name in another language sounding beautiful, perhaps.
Yeah, it doesn't. In English, it's not.
In English,
not running. So this is that was the sounds of alligator sinensis.
Sinensis, and that's the Chinese crocodile.
Chinese alligator.
Chinese alligator. Excuse me. Once more for luck.
Yeah,
there it is. Okay, so yeah, wow. Okay, well, I mean, I worked out as a crocodilian. Admittedly, this is an episode we're going to be talking about crocodilians, so that was a bit of a clue. I did have some prior knowledge, but yeah, still, it's smaller than the Nile crocodile, which is what we're going to be talking about. So
I don't know how much smaller.
Let's move on. Nile crocodiles are quite huge, aren't they?
Chinese alligators, 1.5 meters to 2 meters is what it's saying on Wikipedia.
And a Nile crocodile's to 4 or 5 meters?
I
think so. They're massive, mate. They're like Africa's answer to saltwater crocodiles, aren't they, basically?
Yes. Let's just have a quick hit. Yeah, 3.5 to 5 meters.
Big. Okay, cool.
Again,
so we're moving on to crocodiles.
Just jumping on Wikipedia, so take it as you will.
Oh, yeah, Wikipedia. They do a lot. All right, let's move on to our crocodiles anyway. So we've got this paper, Thévenet, Papet, Coureaud, G, Levréro, Grimault and Mathevon, 2023. Crocodile perception of distress in hominid baby cries. Proceedings of the Royal Academy Society. Proceedings B is where it was published.
Do crocodiles care when baby chimps are crying? / do they use that as a as a signal that there's a tasty defenseless treat nearby? Yum. Baby bonobos.
Yeah.
Delicious.
Do they? Well, they're certainly noticing it, aren't they? And this is
I'm pushing a lot more there. It's more about noticing rather than the motivation behind it.
Yeah, we don't know what they're up to.
Because it could be the opposite, of course.
But this is quite a cool case here because it's a case of cross-species communication. So there's quite a lot of similarity in the way that animals kind of express themselves vocally, including humans. So the way that we deliver speech tends to vary based on how excited we are and also on how either positive or negative that expression is, right? So we vary how we express ourselves based on how we're feeling. If someone's screaming, they're obviously a little bit rattled, you'd say that's quite a high level of arousal or excitement, and probably negative. Well, it depends what kind of scream it is, Ben. Screams can be happy, but they can also be sad. And you can, if you think about it, you can kind of differentiate between them. People want to go faster. Yeah, it's a fun scream. But then you've got like, oh my God, there's a runaway train and it's going to hit my child. That kind of scream. Different scream. That's quite a grisly image. Sorry. But yeah, the way we communicate, the long and short of it is that the way we communicate is different. Positive sounds usually are quite short and tend to have less variation in pitch compared to negative sounds, which kind of have this like greater variation in how high or low they are. And also when animals get more excited, their sounds tend to get louder, faster, higher pitched, more changes, but also like rougher, more like
more chaotic, right? That's a term they quite frequently use in this is chaos.
Yeah. Excitement equals chaos in speech. And
a lack of harmonicity, right?
Yeah, did you understand what that meant? I didn't really understand what that one meant.
No,
lack of harmonicity.
No.
We won't worry about that one. So yeah, let's not wait any longer. Let's talk about crocodiles. So crocodiles and humans share a common trait. We share quite a lot of common traits with crocodiles, actually.
Yep.
One of the ones we share is that we give parental care to our offspring. And we also respond to their cries. So if we hear a baby crying, our instinct is to attend to it. And the same goes for crocodile parents. However, that knowledge of distress calls, which crocodiles have, can also be used for foul play, both by crocodiles and humans. So it's already been established by other scientists that if you play the sound of a puppy whining, which is like a distress call from a puppy, or a human baby crying, crocodiles seem to be attracted to it. And so yeah, crocodiles can react to the cries of infant humans, which is, pretty pretty grim in some ways.
Just jumping on the crying puppies thing, there was another interesting paper that they cited, which I went and had a look at, which was that people's ability to detect distress in sort of puppy whines changed depending on their experience with raising puppies. So there's all these sort of additional... Basically, the point that I want to make is there's sort of species level generalizations that we'll be making, but there's all that sort of additional nuance going on here with sort of past experience possibly playing an additional sort of additive role with the responses. And I mean, this paper we're talking about here, these are crocodiles that are in a zoo, right? With
they're in a
limited
big park.
Exposure to chimpanzee and bonobo young as prey. So I don't know, maybe in places where that's actually a positive association between distress calls and getting a meal, these associations may be stronger, maybe slightly different in the wild, right?
Yeah, you've also got the situation where...
And there's no reason
there's like a bunch of crocodiles in one place, right? So like if one of them starts doing something, the other ones might just start doing it.
Right.
So it could be exaggerated too by the fact that these crocodiles rule in groups in big pools. But yeah, that paper about the humans and the puppy whining was really interesting. Like we can decode puppy whining, and we can also tell how distressed a puppy is based on its whine.
Yes.
There's like gradients of stress. And like you said, people who have experience with puppies are better at that. But that's really interesting because there's this dynamic between dogs being domesticated and humans recognizing, like there came a point in dog evolution where having a call which only warned your mother that you were distressed was weak compared to a call which also warned your human caregivers that you were distressed as well.
That's
right?
fair. Yes, it's happening both ways, isn't it? Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so the dog evolution is also pressing to have puppies which humans can understand, which is crazy. It's really cool dynamic.
Which would be absent with the bonobo crocodile thing, unless it was such a selective pressure that it would be wise for young bonobos to cry in a way that crocodiles did not understand, so it didn't warn them.
Well, you're jumping the gun a little bit there, Ben, because you're talking about bonobos. So
I am talking about bonobos because it's a fun word to say.
Yeah, bonobo. They are obviously hominids. So hominid is the family Hominidae that includes us. So in this paper, they used a few different hominids to see if the crocodiles were reacting to their calls and people. They were looking at humans, which is obviously us, chimpanzees, everyone knows chimpanzees, and also bonobos, which are basically the kind, more relaxed version of chimpanzees. They're two different species. They're very similar.
Are they in the same genus?
Yeah, I think they are.
Because you've got Pantroglodytes is chimp.
Yeah, I can't remember. But yeah, I think they are same genus because they were split about 1.5 million years ago by the Congo River. The Congo River split them up. And so bonobos are kind of like chimps, except they're a little bit smaller and they have a different hierarchical system. The females are the boss in bonobos, and they're generally just chillers. They're not particularly violent. They like settle their scores with like cuddling and like sort of grooming and some like sex stuff. So they're pretty chill. And yeah, there's a theory that the reason chimpanzees got so much more aggressive than bonobos is because they were on the side of the Congo River that had gorillas, so they had to compete with gorillas, whereas the bonobos just had themselves and like more plentiful resources due to the absence of gorillas. So they evolved to be like chill.
I've never heard
I'd never heard that.
Where does that come from?
I think it's a cool idea. Where did I read that? Just some article. It's grey literature.
Okay, well, I'm gonna choose to not believe it. Yeah.
Well, I think it's it's common hearsay. So
I heard it straight from the bonobo's mouth. It was the gorillas that did it. I tell you, the gorillas.
I mean, I don't know how you'd actually prove that, given that there's no like control for either of those things. You don't have bonobos that don't have gorillas, and you don't have chimpanzees. You don't have bonobos that do and chimpanzees that don't. Yeah, I don't know. It might just be one of those theories. But yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to remain skeptical.
Going back. Yeah. Okay. Well, going back to humans and bonobo cries. So, human listeners, like we've already said, when you hear a high pitched call, you think of it as having a high distress value, right? It's like something really high pitched, probably really distressed. We mainly listen out for how high pitched the cry is to decide how much peril the child is in, and because of this, when we played bonobo calls as part of this study, we always perceive them to be like really distressed.
Yes,
it's just because bonobos have a higher pitched voice than humans.
Right. It's sort of baked in bias there. Not hearing the bonobo call for truly what it is, it just happens to be more high pitched and therefore, treated with greater urgency.
And so they played all these crocodiles, the three calls of the three hominids, and they wanted to see whether or not they were interested. And it turns out that crocodiles were more interested, these Nile crocodiles, in more distressed cries, right? So they could actually tell how distressed things were, and they seemed to be more interested if it was more distressed.
Yes. I think that's glossing over a slight limitation of the paper, is they don't have a one-to-one for the actual emotional state of the animals when they were making the distress calls, right?
What do you mean? So they don't know exactly how distressed the animals were, as in the non-humans?
So you assume, they've sort of broadly chopped it into like high distress, low distress, or lower distress, but there's not anything. They couldn't put heart monitors on the animals and things like that to really cement the distress level there.
They were kind of taking the context that the animal was calling in and inferring how distressed it would be by it, right?
Yeah, and it's not like, I'm not sort of it's not undermining what they're saying in the paper. It's just saying it in such simple terms is almost sort of missing something, because there's one way that they separated the high distress and low distress was by pitch, correct?
Initially,
right.
I don't know, to be honest. I'm not.
So that was I think that was one of the separations that helped to discriminate against types between these different types of call. But the crocodiles didn't care about pitch. They were picking up on other characteristics of the call, which are also associated with higher distress. But so they were using different aspects of the call than what we would use to differentiate distress.
And that's what's cool about it, is because their method of differentiating distress is almost like less prone to being wrong, at least in the small amount of cases they have here.
Well, in the
so
sort of bonobo like pitch mediated one, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so we're so keenly attuned to the pitch that we hear bonobo calls and think that they're more distressed than they are. But like you say, crocodiles are actually not really paying attention to pitch. They're paying attention to like the amount of chaos and whatever low harmonicity is, and like different sort of like prominences in different parts of the like actual sound. So they're kind of looking at it in a not like a more objective way, but just in a different way. And what seems to be a benefit of the way that crocodiles are sort of determining what is distress is that their reaction is less dependent on the animal emitting the cry, at least for these three. So whereas humans are kind of tricked by the high pitch of the bonobo call, crocodiles aren't. Like crocodiles see that call, hear that call for what it actually is, and at least in terms of the, you know, the kind of architecture of this study, they seem to be able to determine distress without using pitch, and it seems to give them a more honest impression of what pitch is as compared to us listening to these three calls. And I suppose that crocodiles probably have a really good reason to like try and actually determine this, whether or not the young of animals are distressed, because they can go and eat them. We're probably, you know, we don't have such a high selection pressure on that, I guess.
So partly that, or for crocodile young distress calls, a key characteristic of their calls could be the sort of chaos and lack of harmonicity, right? So they could be sort of being made to pay attention to these calls because they are the most close to like key characteristics of crocodile distress calls.
That's interesting.
So you do have this too, because you're just looking at attention, right? So they were measuring the number of, or the rate of crocodiles paying attention to these speakers that they had deployed playing the sounds. So that's the sort of behavior that you're looking at here, is just paying attention. What the motivator is behind that attention, you know, yeah, it could be, oh, tasty snack, or it could be, oh my gosh, there's something that has characteristics that it could be a young crocodile in trouble.
Yeah, that's the thing they can't be sure of.
Yeah.
They could be reacting in a predatory way, but they could also be reacting in a caring way. But then
they do mention in the discussion that different crocodiles approach the speakers in different ways, which could also just mean that there are different crocodiles reacting in different ways. So it's not even like a universal. Some of them swimming under the water, some of them scooting along the top of the water, which, yeah, it could be an individual thing.
Some of them also nibbled the speakers, which, I mean, they do nibble the babies to pick them up, but also that kind of seems like a hungry crocodile doing a hungry crocodile thing, but you can't really ever be sure.
Or it could just be exploratory. I mean, don't they look after their young in their mouths as well?
They do, exactly. Yeah, they do. So that was the thing. Crocodiles, when you play them these sounds of the distressed creatures, they seem to know, they go towards it, they're interested in it. And we can't be sure why, but they're probably, you know, they probably are, at least in some part, particularly the ones that went underwater and did the whole ambushing thing. They're probably thinking about munching these baby animals crying out in distress. And I think that's really cool because, you know, them being attracted to the cries of human babies suggests that these like massive predators could have been a danger to humans throughout our evolution, because we evolved in the African cradle, and Nile crocodiles have been abundant the entire time throughout human evolution. So yeah, it's quite likely that babies of all species of hominid, or at least many of them, have kind of been threatened by predation from crocodiles all the way through our evolution, possibly, which is a cool idea.
Possibly. Or it's just a weird, like, ancestral trait of young animals to have calls that sound kind of like that, and it pops up in both crocodiles and humans, and probably will pick up in a lot of other vertebrates that have parental care.
Do you think it would be sort of socially acceptable to create a model baby in a crib and then just have it made out of pure meat and see what the crocodile does? If it smells meat, it's going to eat the meat, right? If it gets to the speaker and there's a meat baby there?
Yes, but then you need a meat baby that doesn't make the call, right? And then what you care about is the difference. If they find it faster and are more ready to eat it, if there is a call going alongside it.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, cool.
Yeah, you could pull that off.
That sounds doable, yeah. But there we go. We have Nile crocodiles are attracted to the calls of baby humans and also baby bonobos and baby chimpanzees, and they seem to be able to have an idea of, they seem to be more interested if they're more distressed. So we got some any other business this week, Ben. The first thing is actually a little bit of a grisly thing that's been affecting our native amphibians here in the UK.
Oh, yes.
So back in 2020, there was a picture went up on social media of a toad with leeches all over it. And so this prompted the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Amphibian and Reptile Group and the Isle of Wight Reptilarium, to launch a social media campaign to see how widespread this phenomenon was. Mm-hmm. And there's a picture of in the paper, this is actually the original picture that kind of set off the search, of a toad with loads of leeches on its eyes. And it just looks horrible. Like the toad clearly can't see. I would assume there's some damage to the eyes going on here.
I mean, eyes are pretty delicate in the broad scheme of things, and leeches... I mean, they're not the most damaging of creatures, but I feel like compared with eyes...
Yeah. Leeches are really more of an inconvenience for us, but I feel like if they're on your eyeball, it's not going to be good.
Well, and comparably, these are big leeches for the size of toads, right? If you had a leech the size of your hand on you, you'd notice it.
Yeah, but the results, the kind of findings from that social media campaign and all the people who got involved have been published as a paper in the Herpetological Journal by Seilern-Macpherson et al. And so, yeah, this has just come out and it's cool. So they did this social media thing and they had quite a few respondents. So it turned out they found 41 cases of leeches on amphibians in the sort of southern UK. I think it was like Devon, Hampshire, Isle of Wight, maybe a bit towards London, but it was very much centered on the south of the UK.
Yep.
And they had a bunch of these leeches. They went and actually got some of these leeches and sent them off for genetic testing. And it turns out that the majority of them are actually an introduced leech species from Tunisia, which goes by the name Batracobdella algira. Doesn't have a common name that I could find. But this is a genus of leech, Batracobdella, which is usually associated with amphibians. And that genus name actually means frog leech, essentially. So
well, that tracks it, doesn't it? It's appropriately named.
Doing what they say on the leech. And yeah, they basically found that these leeches were generally observed to accumulate mostly on and around the eyes and the sort of surrounding eye area, as well as the throat and armpits of common toads. So the throat and armpits are areas that are unprotected by their sort of toxin-producing glands that they have. So those are probably good places for the leeches to go. And yeah, they just basically recorded this new thing. That species of leech probably came over from either ornamental plant or animal trade, and there's a chance it made its way over naturally, they talk about, because these leeches are capable of long distance dispersal via birds and stuff, but realistically coming all the way from Tunisia, I think it's probably most likely that this came with something humans did, but we won't probably ever know for sure. And yeah, another thing that our UK amphibians have got to watch out for, we do have a native leech which looks very similar and in the same genus. So whether or not the toads and frogs have some kind of pre-existing sort of ability and to sort of defend against these leeches, and maybe these are just sort of frogs and toads which are otherwise compromised in some way.
It could be just particularly gruesome examples, and now people are looking a little bit more closely. It looks, you're noticing. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. You'd have to do a proper sort of assessment of leech prevalence in amphibians and then work out what type they are.
Yeah, but anyway, really neat little paper that's come out, and the authors of the paper do say that although they got respondents from the southern UK, their like sampling of social media was probably extremely biased to the southern UK. It's Hampshire and Isle of Wight reptile group, so it could be that there are more widespread cases of this we just haven't seen yet.
So I suppose if you're listening and you see a toad with leeches on its face, take a picture.
Yeah, take a picture and get in touch with somebody from either, I guess Highwag on social media. I'm sure there are places that you can, So that was an interesting one. One other piece of business for me, we had an email from Jesse Yates of the University of Central Florida, a friend of the podcast. Jesse said, "Hi, me again. Still loving the podcast. Definitely hope to meet y'all. By the way, I love when Tom tries to say Jarl, so I intentionally type it. It's not a word. At a conference or in the field one day. Just listened to the 200th episode. Congrats, thanks. And heard the mention of North American snakes and benefits of invasive species. I'm not surprised if people have already emailed you, but the paper you're thinking of is gobies. I went deep into Nerodia literature for my MS thesis, most of which will be published in September. Woohoo, nice. Jesse said, thanks for all y'all do. It's a real treat to listen to such fun folks and try to keep up on such cool literature. Definitely owe y'all a pint or more. I'm milking it now. So, Jesse sent us this study about water snakes in America, genus Nerodia. So this is your classic googly-eyed water boys. And I think you actually mentioned this, Ben. So they're eating this invasive goby. So this came up when we were chatting about Europe, not the USA originally. So we were talking about that massive shallow lake in Hungary, Lake Balaton. Do you remember that? And the dice snakes there were eating an invasive fish species.
Yes, so we're hanging along the sort of rocky exteriors. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And these gobies seem to be a really useful resource for the snakes. And it was a possible case where an invasive species was benefiting a local species.
Right.
Well, you alluded to it, I think, and Jesse has sent us the paper. So there's a USA version of this. Round gobies got introduced to the USA, and some of the places, at least this one place where they were looking at them in this study, the water snakes there, and these are genus Nerodia, they've shifted their diet. So they now eat more than 92% of round gobies where they're found. So basically everything else they've eaten is just like gone out the window. They're just specializing on these round gobies. And where they are, this has kind of happened in just 1 or 2 generations, but now the water snakes grow faster and reach a larger maximum size since the gobies have been reintroduced.
They're just loving it.
Basically, yeah, they're loving it. Obviously positive effects of being bigger and growing faster could reduce predation, speed reproduction maturity, increase offspring production, fuel population growth. It could be a big win for these water snakes. So thanks, Jesse, for sharing that interesting case where an invasive species is having a seemingly positive effect rather than a negative effect. I could see a problem if they're completely reliant on these gobies and the population crashes.
Well, positive for the water snakes, it might be bad for a lot of other species, right? Like positive and negative are pretty heavily dependent on your perspective and the sort of scale you're looking at, right?
Yeah. Somebody wins, but maybe somebody somewhere else is losing.
Right.
Like, what are these gobies eating?
Exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, really interesting case. So yeah, thank you very much for that email. Have you got anything else beyond that, Ben?
I don't. No, not this time. Nope.
No? Cool. So yeah, just to thank our Patreons, patreon.com/herphighlights. If you want to support the podcast, you can get in touch with us. gmail.com/herphighlights@gmail.com.
It's all backwards, mate.
And you can follow you can follow us on Instagram, herp_highlights, or me, Tom_E_major. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening.